discover the touching story of a widow's incredible promise, one night to save her twin girls' lives. Emily stood in the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast lingering in the air, an unintended reminder of her frayed resilience. With her twin daughters, Lily and Grace, arguing over who would get the last piece of chocolate cake, a knot tightened in her stomach. Laughter should have felt comforting, but it only reminded her of the void left by her husband. Each giggle felt like a spark against her bruised heart. The reality was relentless. Bills piled high on the counter, an ominous reminder of the looming foreclosure on the family home. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the cacophony of hope and despair, battling for dominance within her. The school year loomed ahead, punctuated by the arrival of an invitation for after-school scholarships. The flicker of excitement that had ignited in Emily's chest quickly shattered when she saw the enrollment fee. Tears burned at the back of her eyes. How could she let her daughters down? With little more than her waitress wages, each day felt like a tightrope walk between surviving and crumbling. Desperation was her shadow as she took on extra shifts at the diner, scrubbing the floors of neighbors' homes and chasing fleeting moments of joy at PTA meetings. The exhaustion clung to her like fog, and some days, choosing to push through felt like trying to swim upstream against the pulling currents of grief. She crafted a facade of strength, the respect from her neighbors glossing over her inner turmoil. Yet the pressure of facing her daughters and implicitly promising them a better future weighed heavily on her shoulders. Would they ever truly understand her struggle? The empty chair at the dinner table stared back at her like a cruel reminder, reflecting not only loss, but unrelenting doubts. Could their love alone carry them through these dark nights like her late husband had believed? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just when the hope began to flicker like a dying ember, Emily stumbled upon an ancient quilt at her mother's attic, its worn patches whispering tales of heartbreak and resilience from generations past. It sparked an idea, a lifeline. Reviving the craft of quilting could forge a legacy for her daughters while weaving her grief into something tangible. She could pour herself into creating a quilt that might just pay the way to their dreams. The thought was intoxicating, yet paralyzing. Could she do this while balancing the crushing weight of doubt from naysayers who insisted she had lost sight of traditional motherhood? As she prepared for the local quilting contest that promised a grand prize, panic washed over her. What if it was not enough? What if her efforts embodied all the ways the world judged her choices? As every stitch emerged, the noise in her mind grew louder, revealing layers of her insecurities. Was she sewing their dreams or unraveling under expectations? The clock ticked toward the contest date, and she felt herself teetering on the edge of despair. Would this quilt become her salvation, or simply another testament to her shattered hopes? Anxiety gripped her heart. Could love alone truly shield them when the world outside felt so unyielding? The question lingered, haunting her as the needle slipped through the fabric, tightening every burden while loosening the tether of her resolve. Emily's fingers danced across the fabric, the rhythmic motion momentarily quieting the storm within her. Each stitch was a silent conversation with herself, a dialogue that stretched beyond fear and uncertainty. She concentrated on the patterns, finding solace in their geometric order even as chaos swirled around her life. Yet, the beauty of her creation was tinged with doubt. Was she crafting a safety blanket for her daughters, or merely a tapestry of her failures? The contest drew nearer, each passing day accompanied by a swell of trepidation. Running through the logistics of her plan, she balanced her waitress shifts with late nights spent stitching. Exhaustion threatened to pull her back under, but somewhere in the shadows of her fatigue, determination flickered like a candle fighting against the wind. What if her quilt turned out to be more than a competition piece? What if it transformed into the conduit that bridged her hopes and her daughter's futures? Darkness settled deep within her as familiar thoughts began to creep in. Who was she to think she could succeed? The whispers from both inside her heart and from the judgmental gazes around her stung, each echoing her fears. Facing herself in the mirror one morning, she contemplated what the fabric represented. Not just her love, but a promise to herself to fight, to rise above the ashes of loss, to reclaim a semblance of identity. So, she made a choice. Emily would no longer be defined by her husband's absence or her socioeconomic struggles. She would be defined by her resilience. This revelation stirred something deep, propelling her into action. As she gathered her materials each evening, a sense of purpose began to lace itself into her motions. She would tell a story with her quilt, a patchwork of their lives infused with love, determination, and the kind of dreams that could reshape futures. The moment she set the last patch in place, an almost euphoric rush enveloped her. The quilt was no longer just a collection of pieces. It was an embodiment of her strength, an artifact of her journey. This realization shone brightly, emboldening her to share the quilt with the local community where she once felt so disconnected. To reveal her creations was to unveil parts of her soul that had long been concealed by grief and the facade of keeping it together. But the fear of vulnerability lingered, menacingly whispering in the back of her mind. While she craved validation, craved to be seen and understood, the prospect of rejection loomed ahead like a dark cloud. She pondered what it would mean to unmask herself before her peers, and the thought was both exhilarating and paralyzing. Late one night, as she made the final touches, she envisioned the possibility of talking to others, sharing her story and the quilt's significance, offering her experience of hope born from despair. Yet, the nagging voice questioned her ability to encapsulate her truth. If she faltered, what would that mean for her daughters? What would be lost in the fabric of her honesty? It was this mix of dread and hope that fastened Emily to her sewing machine, her heart beating in time with the rhythm of the needle. She could either remain hid behind her fears, or have the courage to step forward. The quilt was ready, and so finally was she. But how would she tackle the crowd that awaited? Would they understand her journey, or would her honesty expose her vulnerability, leaving her more fragile than before? The day of the contest approached, and as she mulled over her choice, she felt the weight of destiny on her shoulders. Would this be the moment her life began to change, or simply another chapter of struggle? As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a fiery shade, Emily prepared herself for tomorrow. The time for revealing her heart was at hand, but first she needed to confront the silent questions lurking within. Did she believe enough in her journey to take that leap, or would fear tie her to the past? The dawn of the contest day dawned with an eerie calm, a deceptive stillness that made Emily's stomach churn. Thoughts spiraled within her like a whirlwind, each precarious twist a reminder of her doubt clashing with her hard-fought determination. She had spent restless nights imagining the crowd before her, anticipating their eyes boring into her, searching for flaws beneath her carefully crafted exterior. Would they see the reflection of a failure, or could they discern the strength woven into every stitch of her quilt? As she made her way to the venue, her heart hammered in her chest. Each step felt monumental, heavy with meaning. The familiar streets seemed to mock her familiarity. They were filled with memories of a life she was grappling to transcend. Passers-by glanced her way, but she felt utterly invisible beneath the weight of her thoughts. Who would take notice of her and her humble creation? Inside the venue, the atmosphere buzzed with nervous energy. Competitors adjusted their displays with precision, their own dreams radiating from the extravagant exhibits. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she set her quilt on the designated table, unfolding it with the care of a mother revealing a cherished heirloom. The sight of the colorful patches felt both empowering and terrifying. Each piece echoed a moment in her life: love, loss, resilience. Yet she wondered if they could resonate with others. As she took her place, Emily felt the penetrating gaze of the judges. They were not merely assessing fabric, they were weighing her vulnerability, eliciting her truth. In that instant, a part of her recoiled, What if they saw her shattered pieces instead of the beauty she hoped to convey? But something surged within her, a defiance that quietly whispered, "You owe it to yourself to speak." She could feel the audience's anticipation, an inexplicable connection blossoming between them. When her turn came, she inhaled deeply, centering herself. The words flowed with unexpected ease as she began to share her story. She unveiled the quilt not just through fabric but as a portrait of endurance, revealing the love and dreams for her daughters embedded within every stitch. With every phrase, the tension in her voice ebbed, replaced by a resolute clarity. The faces before her shifted. She witnessed nods of understanding and empathy reflected back at her, and gradually, her fear began to loosen its stranglehold. This wasn't merely a presentation, it was an offering, a testament of hope against despair. Emily felt the suffocating fears that had plagued her start to dissolve, replaced by a burgeoning confidence. Could it be? Was she doing it? But as the applause washed over her, a new question arose amidst the applause. Was this acceptance enough? Did she still need the validation from the judges to affirm her worth? She caught glimpses of the other contestants, some smiling, some glaring. She sensed looming competition, a silent battle of confidence, and yet they were all telling stories, weaving their own narratives into fabric and dreams. With her heart racing in tandem with her thoughts, Emily's gaze turned back to the audience. In that moment she realized what truly mattered. It wasn't the outcome or the judgment that defined her, it was the raw act of sharing her journey. The connection created in that brief space of time was more fulfilling than any accolade she might receive. But as the event approached a conclusion, exhaustion began to settle in. Worries crept back with a vengeance. What if this small victory did not translate into the life changes she so desperately sought? She had dared to unveil herself, yet the path to ensuring her daughter's future remained uncertain. The crowd's applause faded, leaving behind echoes of doubt. As she stepped off the stage, Emily felt both awakened and vulnerable, two opposing states of being housed within her. Where would this newfound strength lead? How would she transform the momentum of this day into something tangible for her children? As she prepared to leave the venue, the weight of these questions bore down, reminding her that the journey was only just beginning. With determination brewing within her, she looked at her quilt, a tangible reminder of her triumph. But now, more challenges awaited. Would she be able to harness this momentum and take the necessary steps toward securing a brighter future for her daughters? Tomorrow would demand more of her than today, and with every beat of her heart she felt ready to embrace it, ready to confront whatever came next. The moment of truth arrived. Would she seize the opportunities ahead or retreat into the safety of her fears? Emily stepped out of the venue, her heart still racing from the adrenaline and vulnerability coursing through her veins. The quilt draped over her arm felt heavier than it had before. It was now not just a collection of fabric. It was a symbol of the courage she had summoned to reveal her soul to a crowd. Each stitch reflected an experience and a promise to her daughters, yet she was acutely aware that the true battle lay ahead. The crisp air that greeted her felt foreign and invigorating, yet shadowed by uncertainty. It was no longer about the contest. It was about the tangible next steps she needed to take, and her mind raced with possibilities. She could choose to retreat, returning to the comfort of her fears, or she could forge ahead, transforming the applause into action. But what form would that action take? Once home, Emily's thoughts flared to life. She set her quilt on the dining table, the centerpiece of her tiny apartment, a tangible reflection of her resolve. The walls, adorned with memories of her daughter's laughter, also served as a reminder of her duties. What would they think if she surrendered here now? The pressure of being a single mother pushed her mind into overdrive. The following day, with the sun spilling light through their modest kitchen window, she decided to confront her fears of inadequacy head-on. What if she could share her passion for quilting beyond competitions? The thought sparked an ember of hope. Could she teach, inspire, and empower others in the community? She reached for her phone and scrolled through social media, seeking local community groups or newsletters that addressed crafts and skills sharing. The urge to turn her fear into growth tugged at her heartstrings, igniting a flicker of excitement. As she explored, she stumbled upon a local women's group that focused on skill-building workshops and support for struggling mothers. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Would it be too radical to propose a quilting workshop, turning her solitary passion into a communal learning experience? The idea frightened and thrilled her. Teaching others meant opening herself up again, this time not just to vulnerability but to potential rejection. Yet every moment she shied away from the chance was another moment slipping away from the future she envisioned for her daughters. With newfound conviction, she drafted a proposal, her heart racing with uncertainty as she described her concept: quilting as a pathway to healing. Each line echoed her eagerness to build something meaningful. This was a chance to share her story, inspire others, and cultivate a network to reinforce her dream of a brighter life for her daughters. Hours passed as she wavered between sending her message and holding back. Finally, she hit send, a rush of panic flooding her body. That moment of letting go became a defining action, her past, present, and future, aligning into one cohesive narrative worthy of exploration. Once submitted, Emily's mind drifted and reeled. How would they respond? Would they understand her vision, or would they dismiss it? The doubt tangled within her like a dense thicket. The anticipation prickled against her skin, and she realized that this vulnerable act might change everything or lead to nothing. Both outcomes were equally terrifying. As days turned into a restless blur of anxiety and excitement, a reply finally popped into her inbox. It was enthusiastic, inviting her to come in for a brief meeting to discuss her proposal further. The potential felt surreal. Every sensation sharpened and dulled all at once. A victory was within her grasp, yet she couldn't dismiss the gnawing fear clawing at her resolve. What if she failed again? As she prepared for the meeting, Emily grappled with the enormity of her endeavor. She was not just stepping onto unknown territory. She was charting a course through her own fears and aspirations. The reflection she saw in the mirror revealed more than just a mother or a contestant. It showed a determined woman ready to harness her artistry, not just for her own healing but for others too. The day for the meeting arrived, and with each step toward the community center, she wondered how far she would go. The air was thick with anticipation, and the traces of self-doubt whispered continuously. Would this decision push her further into the life she desired, or would it lead her back into the shadows she desperately wanted to escape? Only time, and this meeting, would tell. Emily entered the small, brightly lit room, her heart pounding in rhythm with the shuffling of feet around her. The sight of women seated at a circular table confronted her. A mix of curiosity and warmth radiated from their expressions. This was her moment, yet the vulnerability she had prepared herself to face felt magnified under the weight of their gaze. She took a deep breath, sighed softly to themselves, and collected her thoughts. The layout, a semicircle of eager faces paired with notebooks and pens, showcased an array of personalities. Some bore anxious smiles, others appeared steadfast, ready to judge both her idea and her worth as a mentor. In the depths of her mind, a whirlpool of self-doubt began to churn. What if they deemed her unfit? When the facilitator, a warm woman named Carol, welcomed her, Emily felt a surge of encouragement. Carol's presence was calming and radiated confidence, and for a fleeting moment, it reminded Emily of her own inner resolve. As they exchanged pleasantries, Emily mentally mapped out her pitch. The significance behind quilting as not just a craft but a therapeutic journey, an emblem of resilience. When about to speak, Emily tapped the edges of her quilt, drawing strength from the intersecting threads of fabric. "Thank you for allowing me to share my vision today," she began, her voice steady yet soft. "I see quilting not just as an art form, but as a connection, a communal space where we can heal and grow together." As she continued, she started to paint a story, not just about stitching fabric, but weaving relationships, understanding struggles, and sewing together a support network. She shared her journey, the loss she had faced and the promise she made to her daughters to embrace life, no matter how daunting it seemed. As her words took shape, she noticed the stirring emotions around the table. Nods and murmurs of understanding sparked connection. Each story shared reinforced her conviction. This meeting wasn't solely about her proposal. It was the beginning of forging bonds that transcended the fear of judgment she had harbored. Then, as she rounded off her presentation, Emily felt the tide of her anxiety shift. In this workshop, we will create not just quilts, but a tapestry of our experiences. Perhaps it was her emotional investment or the palpable energy in the room, but suddenly, her doubts felt nothing more than shadows quickly eclipsed by affirmation. After finishing her pitch, Carol leaned forward with genuine interest. "Emily, you have something incredibly powerful to offer. The women here have all faced struggles just like you. Your story can inspire them to share and create." Emily sensed a current of optimism flowing, and it encouraged her to be bolder with her ideas. As discussions followed, she engaged with each woman, listening intently, discovering hidden stories of triumph and tragedy. This collective sharing was emotionally profound. Her fear of inadequacy began to ebb as the room buzzed with enthusiasm. At the end of the meeting, Emily felt illuminated. Hands were raised, questions flowed, and ideas sparked like wildfire. This wasn't a simple crafting session. This was an intentional gathering of lives intertwined through shared pain and healing. As they wrapped up, Carol promised to put her proposal on the agenda for the next community circle, a step that felt monumental. On her way home, the quilt felt lighter, as if it had unfolded in her grasp, revealing the potential it carried. Yet within her, lingering remnants of unease still whispered. A question of how to manage what could become a new form of responsibility. Would she be able to provide what these women needed? Or would she falter when the moment demanded her to lead? Her heart hammered unevenly in her chest, caught between anticipation and apprehension, while she recognized that this leap into teaching was also a leap within herself, the truest test of her strength. As she turned the key in her apartment door, she wondered whether stepping into this role could unlock something hidden within her, something waiting to be claimed. And in that moment, an intimate fear emerged beneath her determination. What if the vulnerability she sought to cultivate in others also drew out her deepest insecurities? With her mind racing, she whispered to herself, "Am I truly ready for this?" The answer eluded her, and the uncertainty hung around her as she stepped into her home, leaving a quilt of possibilities behind, one that could soon become more than mere threads sewn together. The next morning, Emily stood in front of her mirror, inspecting the reflection staring back at her. The faint lines around her eyes seemed deeper today, and she wished she could wipe away the doubts lingering in her mind as easily as she could smooth her hair. Each day she told herself to practice self-affirmation, yet instead, she felt an unsettling urge to retract into the safety of her past, a place where expectations were minimal and her only audience was the gentle hum of her sewing machine. As she sipped her coffee, her mind drifted back to the women she had met. Their willingness to share so openly unsettled her in equal measure. It was a reminder that vulnerability was not a one-way street. Did she have the capacity to hold their stories without unraveling her own? Returning to the workshop idea, Emily opened her laptop and began to draft an outline, but the cursor blinked mockingly at her, as if taunting her apprehension. What if she couldn't connect on a deeper level? What if her words were mere threads, unreadable and flimsy in the face of real trauma? Determined to counter her doubts, she decided to spend the day doing something impactful, visiting the local library to conduct preliminary research on the psychological benefits of art therapy. As she stepped outside, the crisp air invigorated her resolve, pulling her toward the unknown with a sense of adventure that felt foreign, yet welcomed. The library was quiet, almost serene, creating an environment where she could think. She meandered through the aisles, scanning titles that promised both enlightenment and philosophies on healing. Each book contained knowledge that could fortify her ability to connect with her future workshop participants. She jotted down notes, feelings of empowerment swelling as she began to understand the labyrinth of emotional obstacles her potential students might face. After several hours, she returned home feeling revitalized. New perspectives swirled in her mind like freshly cut fabric, awaiting incorporation into a quilt. Yet, even with this newfound knowledge, no amount of preparation could shield her from the inevitable confrontation with her fears. She longed to assure herself that being a mentor did not mean having all the answers. As evening settled in, and the dusky glow crept through her window, Emily found herself at her sewing machine with the pieces of her latest project. She cut and stitched with a focus that had eluded her earlier. Each movement reflected her internal struggle for balance. But the quietude was abruptly pierced by a thought. If she was going to lead these women, she needed to embody the very vulnerability she urged them to express. A moment's hesitation seized her. What if, in this quest to empower others, she was left exposed? The very act of leading required her to face the rawness of her experiences, the loss, the fear, and the dark corners of her mind, all the elements she had laced tightly within her. A sense of urgency gripped her, igniting a desire to challenge herself. How could she expect others to delve into their inner world when she was unwilling to do the same? As a risk-taker by nature, yet cautious by design, this was the crux of her personal dilemma. How to shape a safe space while grappling with the chaotic crevices of her own emotions. Later, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Carol, reminding her of the upcoming community circle meeting. The weight of anticipation settled back onto her shoulders. Emily typed a brief response to confirm her attendance, but this time she chose to express gratitude to Carol for igniting inspiration that encouraged her to move beyond her limits. The evening drew to a close with the stillness that followed self-reflection. The echoes of possibility hummed gently in the back of her mind. Yet as she retired, an unsettling thought surfaced, a whisper woven within her excitement. Without a chance to confront her own demons, how could she authentically invite others to share theirs? As sleep continued to elude her, the intensity of her commitment transformed into determination. The time had come not just to face her fears, but to confront an innate truth. Her journey was interwoven with every story she sought to encourage, blurring the lines between leader and learner. In the whispered silence of the night, the question shaped into clarity. Would she be brave enough to unravel her truths, laying them bare before those she wished to guide? The answer loomed ominously as dawn crept into the sky, casting a shadow on the possibilities ahead. Discomfort clung to her heart like a quilt stitched from the fabric of her own vulnerability. Tomorrow's meeting would determine not just her future as a mentor but also the thresholds she was willing to cross within herself. Would she step into the unknown, or would she succumb to the fear that had so often kept her tethered? Emily woke the next morning with a lingering sense of hesitation, clinging to her like a damp garment. Dawn illuminated her room, pressing against her thoughts with the weight of impending decisions. She brewed her coffee, the familiar ritual grounding her, yet the comforting aroma couldn't dispel the anxiety bubbling within. Today's community circle meeting was looming large in her mind, a ticking clock that echoed her uncertainty. Seated at her kitchen table, she spread her notes from the library across the surface, a makeshift battlefield of ideas and strategies. The promise of what these workshops could become flared momentarily before her, but doubt quickly extinguished that spark. Would she truly be able to navigate the turbulent currents of others' trauma when she was still grappling with her own? The thought pressed hard. She needed a breakthrough, a revelation that made her realize vulnerability is a shared space, not a solitary endeavor. Instead of retreating into fear, could she transform it into a force that empowered both herself and those she aimed to guide? Her mind raced to consider the potential of her position. After all, if she could carve a path through her fears, how many others might that inspire? Emily prepared to leave, her heart thumping wildly as she attached something personal to her outfit, a unique bracelet her late husband had given her. It was a reminder of the promise he had instilled in her, to always be true to oneself, to confront challenges unabashedly. Strapping it on felt like a call to courage, a banner she would carry into her meeting. As she approached the venue, a small community center with peeling paint and weathered charm, the gravity of the moment settled heavily upon her shoulders. Could she unravel the knots of judgment she had tied around herself? And would these women respond to her authenticity? Entering the room, she was greeted by familiar, curious faces. Each woman arrived with their own story, a patchwork of experience mingling with grief, hope, and desire for healing. The small group settled and directed their attention towards Emily. A flicker of recognition sparked in her, a deep understanding that they were all perched upon the edge of their own precipices, much like she was. "Before we begin," Emily started, her voice wavering as she pushed past the apprehension, "I want to be honest. This journey of sharing, it's new for me too. I've had my own struggles, my own silence that I've maintained, and now I feel called to explore that with all of you." The tension shifted palpably in the room. Emily's admission served as a thread, weaving them together, rendering her fears insignificant against the backdrop of their collective strength. For the first time, she saw glimmers of acceptance and empathy amongst the women, her vulnerability acting as a mirror reflecting their own hidden truths. They began to share. Each story was rich with emotion, layered with personal trials and resilience. As Emily listened, she began to realize that her role wasn't to possess the answers or rescue anyone from pain. Instead, her purpose was to cultivate a safe space where every woman could feel seen, heard, and valued. With each shared experience, her own burdens lightened, her fears slowly transforming into insights. Just as a moment of warmth began to envelop the room, a member of the group hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "But how do we start?" she asked softly, "when it feels so overwhelming?" The question hung in the air, laden with a collective vulnerability that could shift the dynamics of their gathering. Emily felt the weight of responsibility again, but pushed deeper than before, determined to guide rather than falter. She understood now that this was a pivotal moment not only for the group, but for her personal journey as well. "What if we began with creativity?" Emily suggested, her mind swirling with ideas. "Art can unlock emotions we didn't even know were there. Let's take that first step together." The mere proposal sparked a flicker of hope. Yet, as she looked into the expectant eyes of the women in the room, the truth settled heavily upon her. Would this exploration of art and vulnerability risk unraveling emotions far too raw to confront? Emily felt the urgency surge within her, for she stood at the threshold of a transformative experience, not just for them, but for herself. The space between anticipation and fear widened as she sharpened her resolve. "Let's give it a try," she declared, but a tremor crept into her voice. "Together." As she ventured into this uncharted territory, she realized that every step forward required deeper introspection. The real question persisted. Could she truly guide these women while navigating her own tumultuous sea of emotions? A realization loomed. She had only just begun to summon the courage to explore the truths buried within, and this journey was far from finished. The choice to step deeper into vulnerability beckoned her enticingly. What would she find waiting just below the surface? As the initial whispers of creativity began to circulate within the group, Emily's heartbeat quickened. She felt the palpable energy that followed her suggestion, yet beneath that excitement lay a gnawing uncertainty. Was she equipped to guide this exploration, even as her own heart bore deep scars? "Let's start with something simple," Emily said, her voice steadier than she felt. "How about we each take a moment to draw what we feel?" The group murmured in agreement, eyes brightening with tentative anticipation. Emily wanted to anchor them, to provide a haven of expression, but her own fears loomed like storm clouds casting shadows over her intentions. As they gathered their supplies, crayons, paper, and a scattering of old magazines for collages, Emily watched, observing the silent exchanges that took place. One woman, a single mother with striking blue eyes, busily prepared her materials, determined to showcase her thoughts visually. Another, An older woman whose gray hair framed her face with warmth suddenly faltered, her hands trembling, revealing her exposed vulnerability. "Emily," the older woman called softly, her voice quaking slightly. "What if my art doesn't capture anything at all? What if it's just nothing?" Emily felt that familiar weight in her chest. The very same fear gripped her tightly, the fear of inadequacy that had shadowed her for years. This was her chance to face it head-on, to fortify both herself and others. "Art isn't about perfection," she assured, her own voice faltering. "It's about honesty. It's okay to create nothing as long as it's a piece of you. The process of trying is what holds the healing." The woman nodded, but Emily could see the doubt still flickering in her eyes. After a deep breath, she moved to her own sheet of paper and began scribbling furiously, each line cascading from her heart onto the page. She drew out every ounce of grief, hope, and uncertainty. Her hand swept over the paper, capturing the essence of her unresolved feelings. The bracelet on her wrist caught her eye, the small charm feeling cool against her skin, as if urging her to dig deeper. Remembering why she was there, the unspoken promise to embrace her pain, Emily continued until the image no longer felt like a representation of chaos, but rather a mosaic of her experiences, woven into something worthy. At that moment, a quiet confidence began to swell within her. As Emily looked up, she caught the women's eyes. There was a mixture of admiration and understanding in their gazes. They were each wrestling with their demons, yet here they were, forging connections through their overlapping struggles. Emily noticed the blue-eyed mother now preparing her materials, a faint smile breaking through her initial apprehension. Encouraged by Emily's conviction, more women began to sketch their emotions on paper, each stroke a testament to their journey. Hours seemed to melt away as the room filled with the soft sounds of crumpling paper and quiet laughs. Each artist became deeply immersed in their creative exploration, progressively shedding the burdens they had carried so long. Emily felt a shift, an undercurrent of bravery flowing through the room. They were embarking on an intimate journey together, one that might fracture their protective shells. Yet, as moments thickened with insight, Emily's self-doubt echoed loudly. Was she offering them vulnerability when she herself was still unearthing the depths of her grief? She pressed her lips together, convincing herself that honesty was a double-edged sword. "Let's share what we've created," she suggested, each heartbeat punctuating her words. "We cannot heal in isolation. Connection is our strength." The quiet room erupted into sharing, stories blooming alongside the array of drawings and collages. Emily's chest tightened as she listened. The personal revelations filled her with a sense of purpose, but a disconcerting thought nestled within her mind. She still hadn't fully acknowledged her own story. As the discussions unfolded, Emily felt the threads of her own narrative waiting to be woven into the group's tapestry. What had she truly encountered in her journey? What was she still hiding? With each woman's brave offering, the need for her own truth loomed larger. Emily sensed it coming, an inevitable confrontation with herself. The responsibility of bearing her journey weighed heavily. Confrontation was imminent. Just then, she glanced at the clock. Time had slipped through her fingers without her awareness. The afternoon light bathed the room in warmth, creating a moment cloaked in intimacy and familiarity. She felt their stories pave the path for her own. "Before we finish today," Emily hesitated, heart racing, "I want to share something personal, a fragment of my journey." Just as the air thickened with anticipation, her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her from her thoughts. A message flashed across the screen. "We need to talk." Suddenly the room dimmed around her, and a darker storm brewed within. What awaited her on the other side of that message? Emily felt the gnawing bite of uncertainty again, this time amplified by the looming shadows of her life beckoning for resolution. Could she handle another revelation? Would she give in to fear or break through to freedom? Now, with all these women looking to her for guidance, she stood at the threshold of a new chapter in her story, one where the expectations of bravery faced the reality of her truths. What lay ahead was an uncharted territory that required every bit of her vulnerability, inviting her to complete the conversation she had yet to start with herself. Would she rise to the challenge, or would her doubts pull her back into silence? Emily paused, heart hammering in her chest as the group's collective anticipation hung heavy in the air. The vibration of her phone felt like an intruder into this sacred moment of vulnerability. She inhaled sharply, collecting herself amidst the tension. The message loomed in her mind, tempting her to retreat, to be anyone but the leader they needed, the exposure too raw and demanding. Yet, she was acutely aware of the responsibility she bore. These women had just stripped themselves bare in front of her, revealing bits of their souls through art and words. Her hesitation felt more pronounced. They needed her to be authentic, to show where she stood in the messy, unfiltered reality of life. The need for her truth pressed against her like a tight uniform, the kind that chafes but cannot be removed. "Excuse me for a moment," she said, her voice shakier than she intended. As she stepped away from the circle and into the corner of the room, she briefly considered ignoring the message. A reactive instinct birthed from fear. But as she clutched her phone, that gnawing uncertainty surged within her again, fighting for dominance. She could feel her heartbeat echoing in her ears, underscoring the gravity of the decision she needed to make. With a quick command, she opened the message. The sender's name lit up the screen. Jack. Memories flooded in, every conflict and shared moment previously tucked away now resurrected with urgency. "We need to talk." The simplicity of the words echoed loudly, yet they were laden with complexity, the kind that bore the weight of their unfinished narrative. Taking a deep breath, she stepped back toward the women. Their eyes sparkled with hope and shared camaraderie, oddly grounding her. "Can I take a moment to regroup? It's an important message," she requested, and the women nodded, respect for her need evident in their gazes. She returned to her seat, heart racing as if bracing for a jump into the unknown. The invitation to share her journey loomed larger now, seeping into her consciousness like ink spreading across paper. She couldn't continue to guide others through their vulnerabilities without unearthing her own. The threshold of personal authenticity beckoned her, a shimmering promise of connection if she dared to step through. "Here's the thing," she began, carefully choosing her words as raw vulnerability colored her tone. "I haven't been completely honest about my own struggles. There's a part of my journey that I haven't acknowledged out loud, perhaps because it feels too painful or too revealing. But if I'm asking you to open up, then I must demonstrate the courage I'm preaching." The room felt charged with anticipation. They watched her, eyes wide and encouraging, as if they were ready to believe in her unfolding story. The realization that they saw her as a pillar of strength infused her with an unexpected burst of courage. "I lost someone dear to me. My husband. The wreckage of that loss still pulls at my seams, and I've been burying it under layers of expectation and responsibility, not just for myself, but for those around me. I didn't want to be a burden. I wish to be a beacon," Emily confessed, each word dripping with her truth. The air grew heavy with empathy and response. She could see their understanding deepen. It reflected in the silence that now enveloped them. She continued, determined to lay it all out. "But in trying to manage that pain, I've overlooked my own healing. I've not given myself permission to feel it all, to be imperfect and fractured." As the truth settled between them, Emily felt a shift awakening within herself. A burgeoning recognition that confronting her darkness would both illuminate her path and strengthen her bond with these women. Yet the message from Jack still lingered like an unopened letter, the weight of it demanding her attention. The time had come for her to face her convoluted reality, to confront not just the grief, but her evolving identity. Would the conversation with Jack rationalize her fears or shatter the fragile armor she'd created around her heart? There was no way to know without diving into it. Before she could meditate further, Emily's phone buzzed again, bringing her back with a jolt. This time, she didn't even have to look to know that it was another message from Jack, insistent and pressing. She glanced at the group, their eyes now brimming with solidarity. The choice had crystallized. Either she could be consumed by fear or embrace it, wielding her vulnerability like a shield rather than a crutch. Steadying her breath, she realized that they were no longer just women sharing stories. They were witnesses to her own journey toward revelation. "Thank you for being here with me," Emily said softly, an invincible determination washing over her. "This next step, it's as much for me as it is for you. I hope you'll stay by my side as I figure this out." The room felt alive, electric with connection and understanding. Just before she pressed into her next move, the phone buzzed one last time, its glow beckoning. The moment of truth arrived, and it was one she could no longer delay. Emily pulled in a shaky breath, ready to confront the conversation that held the potential to unravel everything. Would this lead to another revelation or bring her deeper into uncertainty? Emily sat on her bed, the soft blankets pooling around her like a comforting embrace. The light flickering from her phone was a stark reminder of the unresolved matters that lay ahead. The messages from Jack had stirred a tumult of emotions inside her, an unspoken promise mingled with a sense of trepidation. What awaited her on the other end of that conversation? Clutching her quilt, a labor of love and healing that now draped across her shoulders, she took a deep breath, reminding herself of the journey she had embarked on, devoid of facades, bathed in authenticity. In those moments of reflection, she felt the rush of her workshop, the laughter, the pain shared, and the bonds formed, crystallizing into something undeniably powerful. Steeling herself, she responded, "I'm on my way. Can we meet at the cafe?" Jack's reply was swift, practically aching with urgency. "I'll be there." As she made her way to the cafe, the memories flooded her mind, each one laced with joy and sorrow. A shared life that now seemed distant. But the ache cast a tangible shadow that no quilt could encompass. For the first time, she wasn't just a widow facing the ghost of her past. She was a woman ready to reclaim her narrative, ready to face the people who had shaped her story. Arriving at the cafe, she scanned the room, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm. The atmosphere pulsed with conversation and laughter, yet Emily felt detached, her focus narrowing on the memory of Jack's smile, his familiar ease, the man who had once seen her whole and loved her regardless of her scars. The bell above the door chimed, and he stepped in, looking just as she remembered, warm, inviting, and unmistakably human. Their eyes met, and within the shared gaze, her heart clenched momentarily. Here stood the intersection of her past and present. "Hey," he said softly, an uncertainty mingled with familiarity in his tone. "Hey," she replied, gesturing for them to sit. As they settled into the small booth, the silence enveloped them, weighty with all that lingered unspoken. "I've missed you." Jack finally broke the ice, his voice imbued with vulnerability. "I wanted to talk about everything." "Me too," Emily confessed, surprising herself with the sincerity of her words. "I've been through some changes. My life is different now, and I'm different too." Jack leaned closer, his eyes searching hers. "How so? What's changed?" Taking a breath, she shared snippets of her journey, the quilt, the women she was mentoring, how she was reclaiming parts of herself. "I realized that vulnerability isn't a weakness but a strength. Sharing my story allows others to share theirs, a cycle of healing that connects us." He absorbed her words, his brow furrowing in thought. "That's incredible, but it's not just about them, is it? What about you? Still processing things after everything?" A knot formed in her throat as she wrestled with it. The truth had been elusive, hidden behind the fabric of her experiences. "I am. In honoring my husband's memory, I've learned to find my own voice. Yet facing this with you terrifies me. I want to bridge our past, but I'm unsure how it fits into who I'm becoming." Jack's expression softened. "You've grown, Em. I can see it. We've both had to navigate this new reality. I thought escaping meant not confronting anything, but you've tackled yours head on." It struck her then that she wasn't merely standing on foundation built from grief. She was on solid ground wrought from resilience. Every stitch in her quilt mirrored the conversations unfolding between them, as each layer of fabric merged into a cohesive statement of self. "Can we rebuild?" Jack asked tentatively. "I want to understand. Your journey matters to me." As the connection seeped into the air, a sense of possibility flickered between them. "Rebuilding means honesty, Jack," she replied, steadiness lacing her voice. "Forgiveness requires courage to address the past. I can't go back to how it was, but I believe we can forge something new." His gaze sharpened, an intensity igniting behind his eyes. "Then let's start fresh, together." In that moment, the pieces began to coalesce. Emily felt a sense of liberation wash over her, not just from sharing her journey, but from inviting someone into her newfound strength. Here, in this gathering of truths, the quilt in her heart and the man across from her. What unfolded next was a promise that transcended the boundaries of fear. Walking back home, her heart swelled with a potent blend of anticipation and acceptance. She knew the path ahead would demand continued bravery, but now she was leading with purpose, not just for herself, but for the women who looked to her for hope, and for Jack, who sought to find a place alongside her in the tapestry of her evolving life. She entered her home, filled with the glowing embers of both apprehension and resolve. The quilt hung proudly in her living room, a vivid reminder of the battles fought and the love kindled. This wasn't the end. It was a launch pad. She was ready for the next chapter. Moments like this don't come easily, but they compel action and growth. Emily was excited, ready to face every joy and struggle with an open heart. Now, just as she had done for the women in her workshop, she had shown that vulnerability was the gateway to healing. And deep down, she knew she was equipped for whatever came next. It was time for her story to bloom, one patch at a time, each frayed thread an invitation into a future she was ready to embrace. With her heart steady and her purpose clearer, Emily made a choice: to weave her life with intention, assuring her daughters that strength is a legacy worth passing down. Now more than ever, it was mission critical to take the reins of her narrative, and she was eager to share this newfound truth with her daughters, with Jack, and with the community she was creating. You see, this was just the beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. I want to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread this message of resilience. You need to subscribe now and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.